Hello and welcome to our fourth and final practice demonstration follow along video for our still life unit. Today we are going to be focused on how to add values. So let's begin by grabbing a pencil. We are going to go through and answer these questions together. We are going to begin by numbering the values on the reference photo from the values that are lightest to darkest. So we're going to say numbering the values. We'll use 0 for white, 1 is for light, 2 is for medium, 3 is for dark, and 4 is for where it's solid black. Next, we always start out lighter than you think you need to. We can always add another layer. It's much harder to erase. Next, we use a 6B or 5B to shade your darkest values. We use a blending stump to create your medium and light values. We go back for a perfecting layer with an HB or 3B. Use your layering to remove any sections of values. You should have smooth transitions between all areas. Next and last, sharpen your pencil to add better detail. All right, now you should be to this point where you have erased your grid lines from the right side images, and you should have gone back through and completed one individual line rather than having multiple lines or like a double up. So you are erasing these and completing just a one singular line to help avoid struggles with blending out those dark values from your lines when we're shading. Now, our first step is to collect what we're going to need. You will need first all 4 of your pencils. We've got our 6B and 5B, which are somewhat interchangeable for using as our darker value. Then we have an HB and a 3B, which are somewhat interchangeable as our light colored pencil. You are also going to need your blending stump and your value matching tool. Last but not least, you need our lesson guide. That is what we've been looking at throughout this practice. And we'll flip it to this page that shows the steps of how to complete the shading portion. So we just worked our way through. We are at this point now, so we'll begin at this image. Now, I am going to show you a close-up of what we are trying to do so that you can see what our goal is here. We are going to begin by coming in and numbering all of the solid black areas. So we are looking for where it's solid black, and we're going to go through and add those areas to be solid black until it's shiny. So we're looking for those solid areas, and we're just going to fill that in. Now, I am going to have you guys do this along with me. This is a follow along. So let's begin on the pumpkin. We're going to begin by adding a little bit of solid black right on that line, on this line, on this line, and we're just looking here. And we're going to come up along the lines on the side here, just a smidge right in the middle, just darkening it up. We're gonna come in right on the side here and really add a nice dark crease, and it starts to fade out right at the turn. Over here, it starts out pretty skinny and gets thicker right in the middle, and then gets skinny again. So we're really paying attention to the shape of our dark black values. Now let's come in here. We're gonna add dark on that side as well, and then it stops before it continues down. Now let's add the black in our stem. we have a small triangle that's like the indent of where this begins here, and that is the start of our first solid black line leading up towards the top of the stem. Then we're going to create a triangle of black that's just right at the center of the M of the pumpkin middle section that we created. We're going to make a triangle just right at the top of that and bring that up as well. Then we'll add a couple more solid black lines here. All right. Now let's continue adding our solid black to our shoe, and let's take a look and see where that's going to be. So we've got some right underneath this strap. We've got the shadow that's like right beneath the laces, that shadow there. We've got the track, or at least the bottom of the tread. Then we've got these little shadows underneath and the toe as well. So let's go ahead and begin at the toe. We are going to start by looking and saying, okay, this is a quick transition here, and it is black all the way up to the tippy top of the toe, but notice how it's starting to fade at kind of an angle. So we want to add the solid black only at an angle here, and then allow ourselves space to then fade out in darkness. Let's go ahead and add black to the bottom of the tread as well. And I am gonna do that along the bottom here. I'm trying to keep that line nice and smooth. Now we're gonna go along the inseam. So where it like dips in on your like arch of your foot often creates a small shadow, and we want to be able to fade that out as well. So let's not go too high up. It does go along the side here, this little edge. And just directly underneath our Nike swoosh, we've got a solid line of black there. We've got this whole section next to the laces that's just a solid black line for the shadow. We want to leave some space here so that we are not right up against the Nike swoosh. All right, we've got a little bit of black at the end of our laces. Especially on that underside one. And we've got a substantial amount of black underneath this strap. So I am just coming through under here, and I'm gonna bring that out a little bit because it's a pretty dark area. And I'm gonna wrap it all the way up to the back of the strap. I'm gonna come in along the top of the strap as well. And it's a real quick fade, so I'm just gonna like add a little line. And a little line. All right, I would say probably another line headed up this direction, along the Nike swoosh, and then along the back as well. Now, you are able to look in your lesson guide to see if we've missed any spots that we had added previously for our black section that we're filling in black solid areas. Here is a zoomed in image, so you can kind of have this in the back of your mind or up on your screen as you are finishing. You are always welcome to pause if you need a little bit more time. You are absolutely welcome to pause and follow along at your own pace. Now, one thing I would like for us all to do is to take a moment to sharpen. So we're just gonna sharpen that 6B. Now, what we're going to do next, remember that when we were working on our value scales, oops, on this page, when we were working on our value scales, oh dear. Remember that we went from values 10 to 5 with our pencil. So we are looking for any value that is a 5 or less, or more, so that we can add those in, and the rest we're going to do with our blending stump. So this pass is specifically just to go through and add values that go up to 5. So we're going to begin by looking for where our darker parts are. So let's go ahead and do the stem together. I'm going to use some real tiny little circles here. So I sharpened my pencil, that's why I'm doing this first, is because it's a nice chance to get some texture going. So I'm just gonna add a couple little like scribbly swirlies throughout here, and this is helping me to isolate some white dots. We don't want to fill it in too much because we are trying to keep that texture showing, so we don't want to like completely fill this here. Now we're just adding little white dots, and we'll go back over the top of that with our blending stump. Now let's hop over to the right side of the stem and see how in this space it's actually quite dark. So we're going to come in and let's check and see, is this value a 5 where it leads to? And it is. So we are going to color this entire section because it is all darker than a 5. There is a little bit of like a crease right here. So I'm going to leave just like a little white triangle right at the edge there. So I've just left that little bit of a white space so that when I blend it out, I'll get that little bit of a crease. Now we've got this line that we've already started. We're gonna come in and add a darker medium. It's pretty dark right at this corner here. And then as we work our way out, I want to have you make a specific couple of shapes. Now, first, I'm gonna have you kind of outline, essentially, the spaces where there are highlights. So, for example, in this space, we've got this whole section that is just filled in medium. So let's go ahead and add this in. And it's just a thicker line that goes all the way down to that little point. It should be a slight indent at the bottom here. Now I'm going to leave space for my highlight, and I see that the highlight kind of starts at this angle. It's like wrapping around the top, and right as it drops down the side is when you see that highlight. So I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna add just a nice smooth transition out to white right here. Now on our next section, I am going to really pay attention to what I see. And quite often at this point, students are like, oh, I know how to shade a pumpkin. And they do like all of the same things in every section. That is not what we want, because what we can do instead is look for specific weird parts. Like I always see in this one, like a capital letter H. So if I brought this down, so here's this little section here, and you can watch this first and then try it. I brought this highlight along the edge all the way down. It kind of cuts across and then goes down again and comes out to a skinnier point. So I just kind of outlined this H lightly, and then I'm going to come in and add just a little line. And now I can go through and really start to shade specific spots. So I've got that H. I want to be careful not to go too far into that space. Then I am bringing out this medium tone, and let's check it and see. This is about a 7. So I am going to just go pretty dark through here, and we want to leave those highlights. So be careful not to fill them in. And we're just gonna go through for this first pass to get the basic values to match. Now we are gonna do the same thing in the center section. So come along and follow with me. We are adding the darker section in the center, and then let's add some dark underneath. Now we're going to come up and we're adding this almost like a shadow that's like shaped like a lowercase n. Do you guys see that? N. H, N. Now, we are going to leave these highlights here. So I'm going to be very specific in trying to get lighter and using kind of a line texture to show. We've also got a specific line that's kind of headed this direction and a little dent. So we can start building those. And then I'm just gonna let this fade out so that I can use my blending stump to help me make the lighter values. Now let's head to the section to the left of center. We're gonna start with our shadow, and it's got a little indent here at the top, so I'm gonna show that this side is a slight bit darker. We've got the highlight cutting across and this little indent here that starts out darker at the bottom. this is a softer crease, so we're just gonna add like a fading value here rather than so stark of a line like we have directly above. We've got a shadow on the side, on the right-hand side of that section, and it kind of fades out to be this little highlight along that and a little bit of highlight along that. And we want this center section, like right through here, to be where the highlight is catching. All right, now we are continuing. We've got a little bit of gray before the highlight on this one, and it's kind of like a rectangular shape going around the curve of the pumpkin. So I'm gonna continue that. And we've got this wrapping all the way down. It's fairly dark at the bottom. And then we're gonna fade and press lighter by adjusting the pressure on our hands. Now we're gonna add just a smidge of value on the other side of that. And our last sections are just these behind where it's dipping down for the stem. All right, now let's continue on with our shoe. And if you need to go back to continue working on perfecting the second or this first pass, you are absolutely welcome to do so. Now, as we continue on to the shoe, let's start at the toe, and we want to make sure that we've started with that nice shiny black space, and then we're going to help this have a nice value transition. So we're going along the bottom edge, making sure it's nice and dark, and then we're slowly helping this to fade out so that we have a nice transition. We don't want it to be too dark because it does actually get a little lighter through here. Now I'm going to come in and just shading right next to the Nike swoosh. We're going a pretty dark medium here, so starting to fill that in a bit more. We can come up from the bottom edge into this little strappy space. And we are adding our value all the way up to the Nike swoosh. So let's go ahead, we're filling this value from the bottom all the way up. We do have a smidge of like a darker patch through here, so I'm just gonna add those details. It's a bit darker near the back of the heel, and then as it works its way forward, it shifts a little bit lighter. All right, let's go ahead and shade the space behind the strap that's going right up to the heel. And we'll begin at the space near the tongue and helping this to transition out. All right, now above the Nike swoosh is a touch darker than beneath it, so we're just darkening this a smidge. We've got a highlight through these spaces, so I'm gonna leave that. Now, I never went through and added any value to my basketball, so I'm gonna just darken that up as I'm doing this dark pass. And I'm just adding like little patches for the feathers. I'm not making it very specific. I just kind of like went around the Air Jordan part and like added that, and I'm just adding the lines. So not specific, totally fine. Now I'm gonna come through and just darken up along the base with a little bit of value. We've got a little bit of value like over here on the corner. Let's go ahead and continue filling that strap, and notice that that bottom corner is darker than the top left corner. So we really want to be aware of that. We'll transition our back heel up so it fades to white. We also have the Nike swoosh to fill in. Let's do that inside of those little outlines. We want to leave those little outlines with a nice white highlight there. And then as we work our way forward, it should get lighter and lighter. All right. Now we have our base of our treads of our shoes left, so we're gonna fill that in with a medium so that you can see the transition. I can darken these little vertical lines of the tread so they're still visible. All right, now let's go ahead and add just a little bit more value to our laces. We've got some medium tones just in these spaces here. Now, this is where I would like for you to be before you continue into layer number 2. So we did layer number 1 with a 6B or a 5B. Now we are moving into layer 2 with our blending stump. Now, this is very important that you follow along with your finger. And it reminds me of when I was learning how to read, and it's sort of like you have to keep track of where you are to make sure that you aren't losing your place because you're focused on learning at that new skill. So I want to start with us all pointing. Let's point to this little section, and we're just adding in the gray tones here. We want to leave a little white, so make sure not to fill it in too much. And we're just softening some of these spaces and getting rid of the texture and blending things together. So I've just kind of blended that left side out, kind of roughed it up a bit in that highlight section. Now, let's move to the second section. We're right here. We're gonna leave a little highlight on the side. So we wanna darken that middle crease and then use that to kind of just softly come up, and we wanna dust around. See how this highlight is connected to the highlight next to it. So we want to make sure that it's in the same location. Now we're gonna drop down along this edge, and this part of the crease is soft and kind of blurry compared to the sharp, crisp edge here. So we wanna show that difference. And we're gonna use that to help us blend in the texture, and we wanna leave that highlight of white going almost to the bottom, and then we're bringing that up and just blending out that texture very, very softly. Next, let's do this middle one. We've got that center line that's a bit darker, and the bottom is darker as well. We've got this highlight we're trying to keep, but this does not need to stay white. So we're just coming through, and this whole bottom section, it has light spaces, but not really white until we reach this space right here. Now we are going to continue adding these values all the way up to the top, but we're doing so in a line shape. We can make this just a bit more subtle here with our lowercase n shadow. All right, let's head to the section on the right of center. We're going right up against that edge. We're gonna add that dark to the section next to it. And this is the one with our H, remember? So we're gonna come in, we're just blending these out. And I'm gonna use a very soft touch. And as you start to build up more value on your blending stump, you may need to clean it. So you can do that by twisting it on the side of your paper, or you can grab one of the sanding tools and use that to help you kind of remove some of that excess graphite so that you're not getting darker than you intend. Now, we are continuing to fill in this value, and then we are working on just helping this to kind of fade out to that lighter color. Okay, now let's work on this back section. And this is just a pretty even, nice tone. Back section, and back section. All right, now that was just layer 2. Remember, we still have 3 layers, but let's do this layer 2 for the shoe as well. Let's clean this off. Let's start on the toe. We'll start on the lighter side, and I'm blending that all the way back to where it was solid black. And we've got it just a little bit darker at the base here. Now this strap is not that dark. It's got like a light highlight in the center, so I want to be careful not to fill that in too much. It's darker under the laces and even darker above the Nike swoosh. I'm filling in the space around the Nike swoosh, especially near this arch, like near the bottom of the foot. Blending that in so that that texture is nice and smooth. I'm gonna blend inside of the Nike swoosh and behind the strap, underneath the strap. And then I'm going to blend on the strap itself. And for this, it's mostly blending stump. So I'm gonna go through and I'm leaving some little white highlights. And then it kind of gets lighter as it works its way towards the right. We've got a little bit of value on the tongue here. I would say also our blending stump can fill in the lace section, the actual laces themselves, and just a little blend of dark right where it touches the actual shoe to create that wave look. Now, that was layer 2, and we have gone through and completed it for our pumpkin and our shoe. Now, let's complete our final layer with HB or 3B, and we are going to come through and add our perfecting layer. So you are gonna follow along with me. Let's begin with this line in the back. I made mine a little bit thick, so I might even just kind of define that edge just a little bit more, and maybe on this side as well. I'm going to define the edge of this pumpkin section coming up a little bit, and it's just a smidge darker through here, so I'm gonna try to make it match. Now, something that you should do is check and see, okay, my top of this section is a value 5. Ooh, I am not there yet. So I'm gonna take my HB and I'm gonna blend that out to value 5, and then I'm gonna match the rest of it in that section. Now, this is also a chance for me to add the texture of the pumpkin. So I'm gonna come through and I'm gonna add this little outline of white, and I'm gonna give myself some individual lines. I can draw quite lightly here with this HB, so I'm just adding some specific little spots and details that I see. I'm just like looking through. I see this edge is maybe a bit sharper than what I've got on my image. I see that I've got a little bit more gray in this background to make that highlight stand out, and maybe another little line leading backwards. Now we are on the second section from the left. So we are going to come through and let's follow along with our finger here. I'm gonna add just this little detail right here that's like a little bit darker and getting lighter. And we've got this kind of textural design here on this section specifically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow along and say, okay, like here's a line, and here's some texture, here's a little bit of texture. I'm just like adding little dots essentially with my HB. And I'm going to do that as I start to reach the darker values too, just to start to build up that texture to make it look like it has a higher level of realism. That's what we're going here is trying to match it perfectly, not to have it be similar. Then we can do better. Now we are gonna come through and just add some of these specific little sections that we see here. We've got like a little fade out of the highlights, and I'm going through and just really trying to find, like here's a little detail of it being dark right in the crease, and another little section of it being dark, like a little black triangle between those sections. Just those small details really starts to build and make a big difference as you add more and more. I'm gonna reapply the texture for the N, and I'm gonna add some lines kind of coming up and wrapping around the edge here. So now I notice the bottom of my pumpkin should probably be a touch darker. I'm just gonna add another little layer and blend that up. All right. Now we are going to look at this section with our H. I'm going to try to sharpen the side of my H and also try to like bring in the little bump a little more. I'm also going to add a clearer outline of the highlight next to it. Now the highlight next to it disappears before the bottom, and it does get darker subtly. All right. Now I'm gonna go through the H and add some like little textural marks and maybe even a touch darker from a couple other areas. All right, now let's move on to the right section here. And we are adding in just a little bit more of the dark and then a little bit more of the texture as well. I'm coming in with a darker line just to kind of outline. And then as we're leading into that highlight section, I'm adding curved line patterns here. All right, and so we've wrapped our way all the way around. What I would recommend at this point is just like picking out a couple little textural marks to just make sure that you've added. Go through, see if there's any little textures that you could add, because the more texture you can give yourself at this point, the more realistic it will look. Sometimes I'll even just tap with my blending stump just a little bit to like blend out the last step, and also to add just one last little pass of texture. Now the last step for checking is to hover and compare to make sure that your values are matching. Now I am going to go through with my HB for the shoe, and maybe I'll add some of these stitch marks back in. So I'm gonna add like the stitch rim to the outside of the strap, and just kind of like lining it here to get that to have a touch more darkness as well. Maybe even paying attention to the fact that this corner is dark. And then we're just getting lighter. All right, now I will go into this like shoelace section, and I'm just gonna darken up some of the sections of shoelaces. I'm going to just kind of add a little bit more value here so that it's not white. And I'm gonna add some of the stitch lines to be darker. So we are just doing the perfecting layer through here. So we're darkening all of our stitch lines. We're looking for any other texture details that we could add. Maybe a little bit of shading to the laces. Some perfecting underneath here. Now we see this band underneath, and quite often students think it's white, but I like to go through and add a little bit of the line work to make it have kind of like a crosshatchy texture, similar to what you would see on real shoes. All right, now the last step is to just take your blending stump, and if there's any parts that you just perfected that are a little rough, you can go through and blend them out. Now, that was a lot, and this was just your first chance to practice it. And I think of this as like a person learning how to play music, and you're learning how to play scales first with our value scales, right? Then we're working into our first song. This is like Mary Had a Little Lamb right here. So we are building these skills, and now once you have checked this practice with me, the next step is to move into your final project. And you have the option to draw shoes, pumpkins, or a full range value image of your own choice. So you have 3 different categories you can pick from, and the project instructions are listed in your lesson guide. You'll begin by choosing your photo and setting up your grid, which starts you back at the beginning of the steps that we completed for this practice. And you will complete your final project in the exact same method, but with a picture of your choosing. So as you finish these steps, I would like for you to go along and check them off so that you know right where you are. I hope that this was helpful, and I would love to give you more assistance if you're feeling like you would benefit from that. So come and ask me if you have any questions at all. Thank you so much for watching.